everyone back?
I think so.
I've started. Oh, you started the recording. Perfect. Great. Thanks for that, everybody. For those of you that were on the call with Sophie or didn't hear me say, we had a question around SKE, which was a really good question. So the kind of viewpoint is that where possible, we do encourage future teachers to complete subject enhancement courses for subject knowledge, just because as I was saying, the great thing about this program is that we don't necessarily always take future teachers in the subjects that they have their degree in. So sometimes they flip and they decide that they want to train in a different subject, or it might be that's what the school needs, or maybe their degree is very vague and they don't have a specific subject. Again, the other side of that is that whilst we are in a national recruitment crisis, we can't afford to kind of be choosy. And so we do need to work with what we've got to be able to develop them to improve their subject knowledge to be the very best it can be. And so once they are accepted onto United Teaching, they have the opportunity to complete that subject enhancement course or program. But that cannot take place until they are accepted onto the teacher training program. So in some instances, as I was saying before, we have future teachers who decide that they want to do an A level in the subject, and that then helps to support their application to United Teaching because they show they're doing the A level, they say they want to complete the subject knowledge enhancement course, and that just really then supports United Teaching when they interview them to see that they are really serious about upskilling in the subject that they want to teach. So I just thought I'd flag that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hopefully you found those breakout rooms useful. That's a really important point, Danny, about the SKE, because that is something that we would encourage with them. And it's also worth mentioning, because we haven't mentioned it loads in the session today, that when it comes to the application for United Teaching, we do recommend that that happens, I guess, relatively early on in spring term 1. So thinking about after Christmas, when they've had a full term in your school, looking at then doing the application for teacher training, and we'll give them guidance on that when that time comes around as well. So that's kind of around the time from then that they could potentially start an SKE. I'm going to hand over now to Sophie, who's going to talk through a little bit more about the curriculum content that they'll be covering and how that will work. Sophie, did you want to share the PowerPoint so that you've got the notes, or are you happy for me just to move your slides?
I'm happy for you to move it on, that's fine.
Lovely, here you go.
Fab. Right, to click on to the next one. Is that on the next?
Yep. You on to the next one? Future teacher curriculum.
It's just showing me breakout room still. I think I might reshare. Sorry, my Teams is just having a moment. It's not a training session with me unless there's been some form of like disaster on Teams. So welcome to the world that I exist in. Sorry. It's exhausting. Right, so the future teacher curriculum, I wanted to come back to sort of how it actually sort of exists in reality. So obviously we've talked about it being divided into those 3 phases, in induction, explore and engage, and instill. Now, in terms of how that works, each phase is sort of divided up into sort of half terms. So you can see that every half term, the mandatory part of that in terms of the future teacher study is to complete their self-studies fortnightly. They should approximately take them about an hour. So we sort of felt like that was a really reasonable expectation over the course of a fortnight that they should have, you know, time to do. And they should attend a remote input via Teams. This averages out normally at once per half term. Input sort of from us as sort of a central team that aligns then with the self-studies that they've been doing. I've put in italics the sort of the additional extras. The course is sort of designed so that, you know, future teachers can sort of engage with it as much as they want to. And we've seen our current future teachers do this amazingly this year. Every half term, I sort of suggest some desirable professional experiences that the future teachers can do to support and enhance what they've done in their self-studies and their team's input. And I also do signpost them to additional reading and research opportunities as well, partly because obviously it just, you know, it broadens their understanding, but also partly because it just gets them into really good habits of engaging with their own CPD and, you know, just sort of knowing the sorts of places to look and for, you know, for additional information. So I've given you one example down here at the bottom. This one is slightly unusual though. It's the first autumn term 1. You'll see that there's obviously the self-studies, and they're all centered predominantly around sort of classroom routines, and setting up, how to run your room. You'll notice though that in the first half term there are actually there's more than one input. We've actually put 4 in for this year. The reason being, we just felt from feedback this year from our future teachers that first half term was so important for establishing those routines, behaviour and expectations, and that was where most of them struggled. So we've added some additional input for this year. So they'll start with classroom routines. They're going to have a drop in then the following sort of fortnight to ask any questions that they might have, provide some bespoke support. We're going to also add in this year teaching sensitive issues, because obviously they're going across a number of subjects, teaching potentially sensitive issues in citizenship, PSHE, religious studies, English, lots of subjects that cover that, and we wanted them to feel really well prepared to do that in their different subjects. And we've also then put in an additional input this year as well on teaching as a profession. As I said, sort of this year, re-highlighted the importance of them really understanding what a role in teaching entails. So we've added that in, but normally there'd only be 1 input per half term, and then that will just be sandwiched in between the self-studies. All of the information in terms of dates in the self-studies, they're all in the handbook, so you don't need to make a note of any sort of dates. That's all in the handbook on the Teams page for you. What I'll also do every half term is send out to school leads, mentors and future teachers a half term overview. So obviously, as much as all of the information is in the handbook, I think we found generally this year it's really nice just to have a snapshot of your half term, so you know exactly what's coming up, what you need to do, and when things are happening, just as a nice little reminder. So at the start of every half term, I'll send out an overview of curriculum aims, the self-studies that need to be completed, the dates of the input, and just a reminder of those desirable professional experiences, what mentors should be doing that half term, and the reading and research that they can access. So this is just an example from the first autumn half term. Here's just an example of the sorts of desirable professional experiences that we would encourage them to do, such as completing a break and lunch duty with a member of staff, exploring opportunities to be involved in extracurricular clubs, see students outside of the context of lesson time. So that will all come out to you as the year goes on. Assessment wise, it's not a formal program in the sense of it's not like the ITT year with the QTS sign off, or the ECT induction, but we do want the year to be in some way assessed so that we can support their development. And the whole point of the assessment that we do should be developmental and sort of non-judgmental to support them in being the sort of the best teacher that they can be. So what that involves is learning walks informally from the mentor and the school lead, as Natalie and Danny both said earlier, to sort of identify areas of need. And it will also fall under the remit of the mentor to complete a professional learning conversation once per half term, and that will be completed, as everything else will, directly onto the Teams page. So I'm sure lots of you are familiar with the concept of PLCs just from other training providers as well. But essentially, I just call them like a geeky teacher chat, which is just basically where the mentor and the future teacher have half an hour of time dedicated to talking about their learning that half term, the progress that they've made, the impact that that's had on students, and just discussing their further areas for development. So again, this will be on the Teams page, an example of a completed PLC. It's not designed to be onerous. A couple of bullet points per question is plenty in terms of a record of that discussion. We also want, obviously, our trainees as mandatory to complete the self-studies and come to the input. We also wanted to sort of recognise this year. So we will sort of look at sort of a UL certificate of completing this future teachers programme, just to sort of really celebrate the work that does go into engaging with this curriculum. So that will come out next year if all self-studies are completed and they've come to a minimum of 6 input sessions over the course of the year. Annie, I'll hand over to you for this bit.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so I just thought I'd touch on quality assurance and mentioned this slightly earlier in terms of how we can support you to support your future teachers. And so this part is hopefully something you will be fairly familiar with anyway, because many of you will be familiar with United Teaching's process for their progress reviews and that opportunity to capture whether they're on track or not, and that intervention that's so needed. And so in your Teams folder, you will find that the future teachers have access to all of their self-study, and so they will be expected selected to complete that, you will be able to track that because you will have access to see how well they are getting on with that and can pick up conversations around whether they need support there or not. But ultimately, what we would like you to do is just rag them. So if they are red, you are telling us that they are not completing that at all. Amber, they're doing some self-study, but not as much as they should be. And green, obviously, they're on track and they're doing everything they can to support their own professional development. So that's fairly standard. The other thing that we're going to bring in new for next year in order for us to support you more and to intervene where we feel that might be needed is an on and off track mechanism similar to the RAG to support with that application to United Teaching. So like I said to many of you when we're in the breakout room, ultimately the reason why we are doing this is to try and capture a market for United Teaching that might not be ready for that immediately. And so we do need to be checking their progress, intervening where possible, and working with you to be able to support them, particularly if you're new to this program, which many of you are. And so again, just each half term we'll be asking you to rag their progress. So green on track, amber off track, but you are able to offer that in-school support. So you are putting measures in place to be able to do that, and you're confident that actually with those measures in place, they will make the recommended progress. And red will be off track and need extra support. So that will indicate to us that we probably need to do some work with you to find out exactly what that support is and how that's needed. And then as a central team, we will be responsible for working together to just speak about how we can support. So Sophie will be working with the Bournemouth cluster, Natalie with the Swindon and Wiltshire Teaching School hub area, and I'll be working with United Learning Schools. So again, just working with you to ensure we're supporting you as much as possible. You will be notified of missing PLCs within the first few weeks of each half term, because we will be checking that they are happening, and you know that's a really important part of the Future Teachers progress, and attendance as well. So Sophie will be monitoring that attendance to sessions so that we can just keep on track. So we're hoping this is a kind of new strand really for us in terms of that QA. We've done bits of it, but what we're trying to do is centralize it, and like we were saying before, Sarah, align that to United Teaching and the way they work as much as possible, because that is what you will be familiar with. So this is an example really of that tracker. So you can see there, you'll just be required to rag it, and then we can go in and offer that support as much as possible. I'll just touch on support from the central team and teaching personnel, and I'll let Ben kind of pick up on anything he thinks I've missed. But ultimately, these are kind of the things that we believe are vital in terms of the support around how teaching personnel can intervene. So teaching personnel will play a really active role in supporting future teachers, not just the first 15 weeks, but beyond that too. We know that Ben loves a school visit. And so, you know, joking aside, Ben really does care about how they do. The more that he can get to know the schools, the better it is. And the same with those of you that are working with Miles in the north, because actually every school is different. Every school has different needs, has different way of working. And so we've found that we have been most successful when Ben and Miles have spent time in those schools, meeting with leaders, meeting with teachers, having a look around, taking part in the interview days and so on. The first 15 weeks are vital because future teachers are on what we call a temp to perm contract. And so that means that firstly, kind of all of the paperwork is left to teaching personnel, and they liaise with HR in your schools to kind of get all of that finalised and sorted. And they will also work with the cover manager to support the initial stages of the contract. So am I right, like weekly timesheets and things like that, because they're paid directly through teaching personnel. But also the best part of this 15-week contract is that if you find that the future teacher just is not right for your school because you just know, or you've given them a few chances in the first 15 weeks and it's not working out, the progress reviews indicate that they are red and they're not going to progress, you actually have got the right to dismiss them. And we've used that a couple of times in 8 years, not many, but we have used it. And so it is a really, really useful tool. And on the side of the future teacher, it's useful for them as well. So they've got that option to say, this isn't right for me, kind of no worries, we'll try something else, and we'll find you someone else that might be more suited. Ben, have I missed anything there, or anything you build on?
I don't think so. No, the only thing I would build on as well is that what we do with the candidates in that aspect of things. So, like with myself in particular, we do have regular contacts with them. I think one thing that's really important from both the future teachers' perspective is that they also have, I like to call it like a third party voice sort of thing. Sometimes it is nice for them to have a little bit of a chat with someone that's in the nicest way possible they don't see in day out. They, even if they sometimes might want to have like a little moan or something like that, which from time to time in teaching we do want to. So I think it's important that for us throughout the 15 weeks, and as well as throughout that first and second year in particular, that we are there if they need support. We're kind of there as like a guidance thing, really. With the HR aspect of things as well in that 15 weeks, it's quite important as well to touch on the vetting aspect of things too. So during that 15 weeks, teacher personnel would get them to complete DBS applications, references, safeguarding training and stuff like that. So when they come into your school from day one on that course, they are fully vetted and they have full safeguarding training, etc., etc. Obviously, once it comes to that end of that 15 weeks, once that 15 weeks is complete and they transfer onto your school's contract, there's no like additional fees or anything like that with teaching personnel. We would just work with your HR teams to provide references and the information that we've gathered, so you guys would have that as well. But yeah, no, and again, one thing to bounce on with what Danny said, and I think it's very, very clear in particular with Glenmore, Winton, Avon and Cornerstone now, is that because I've known the schools really, really well and known them over a number of years, it helps me to then identify the qualities of people that you guys are looking for. So, and I probably echo what Miles will probably echo us as well, but we do want to try and come into your schools as much as possible. I know logistics and travel and stuff like that are some sort of kind of restriction to it, but the more time we spend in your schools, the better it's going to help us to find a better fit for your schools, if that makes sense. So, if we haven't already, please do reach out to myself and Miles, and we can, we can obviously arrange to go into that.
Thanks, Ben. That's perfect. Over to you, Sophie.
Okay, so everything this year will be on sort of centralised Teams pages. I know a couple of you have obviously worked with me on the programme last year. Me and Teams is like an evolving journey. So I'm sort of hoping that this is something that will sort of really support you in your roles next year. So what there's going to be, there's 3 future teacher teams pages, one for the Bournemouth cluster, one for those in Swindon and Wiltshire schools, and then one for sort of wider United Learning schools that don't fit into sort of either of those brackets. On the future teacher teams page, there will be a general folder that's accessible to everybody, and that's where you're going to be able to find all of your key documentation, like the handbook that I've referred to earlier today. You'll also be able to find the slides of any input resources that we've used in their training, and I'll also put the half-term overviews in there as well. You will also find on Teams a private sort of locked channel that will contain your quality assurance tracker for the future teachers in your school. Only you and obviously us as the central team will be able to see that folder. And then your future teacher will also have their own individual private channel within that Teams page as well. That's visible to them, their mentor and the school lead, and obviously us as a central team. And what we want them to do this year is make sure that all of their self-studies are completed directly onto the documents in the Teams page. I know this year sort of I've been sending them out on Teams. People have been sort of downloading them and sort of completing them in their own way. What we really want for this year, as sort of Danny's talked about today, for consistency and our sort of quality assurance of the programme, is that everything does get completed directly into those Teams folders. So your support with that as school leads will be really valuable. Now, I wanted to give you time to take a look at the Teams page if you haven't already. A, to give you a bit of time to look at it. B, to also flag up any early issues with people who aren't able to access. This will be inevitable, but I'd rather obviously know now if you're having trouble accessing any part of the Teams page, so we can put it right, obviously prior to September. So I want you to see first of all that you can access your Teams page. You should all have had an invite. If you don't have one, put any sort of issues really in the chat. Myself, Danny, and Natalie can then sort of have a look at making sure you can be added, etc. See if you can locate the handbook in the general folder, so you can just sort of get a feel for where things are. And also check that you can see and open the individual folders of the future teachers in your school. I've arranged it so that the school name comes first, the future teacher first name, and just then their initial. And as I said, just put anything in the chat that you're struggling with or don't have access to. So if you can just have a couple of minutes to do that now, that would be great.
We wanted to give you, I guess, this time within the meeting to have a look at it, to flag any issues so it doesn't become an additional bit of workload going forward. So maybe if we give you until 10 to, and then we'll come back together for the last little bit.
Yeah. Fine. We have our first one.
You predicted this.
Oh, this is exactly Sea Haven. Danny, just remind me, is this wider UL?
Yes. I thought I had Abby's details, but I'll just check now on the contact sheet.
Yeah, that's fine. I've added people as and when I've received them. Fine. So it would be quicker if you're able to just to quickly post your email in the chat, and then I can sort of just get you added straight in from there, if that's okay.
Yeah, I've changed it from Maria at Sea Haven to Abby on the contact list now. So if you just do it on the Teams page, you should have everything up to date, Sophie.
Stockport, that's wider UL, isn't it, Danny?
Yes. Serafina, I'll add you to the main contact list that we have for Sea Haven as well, so that Sophie just knows that to liaise with you in your role.
Those who have just been added or like relatively recently added, you won't be able to see the private folders yet. What basically happens is it takes teams a weird amount of time to catch up between someone being added to a team and then me being able to add you to private channels. So if you've just been added, you won't necessarily be able to see the private teams yet. What I might just do in a second is share my screen with you so you know what to expect to be able to see. And then that will probably give you an idea.
It's good to know there are ones there along with the ones that aren't. So thanks for those saying that you can see them and they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing is to remember to do with Teams that you have got that sort of drop down list. If you use Teams when you're schooled, in the top right hand corner, you just have to select Glenmore and Winton Academies, which I can see some of you don't want to do yet because it might kick you out of the call. So that's fine. Perfect. Just for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to see, if I just try and show you a Teams, if I just show you, say, this is the Bournemouth cluster. Can everyone see this on their screen? So I can obviously see here all of the folders because obviously we have access to all of them. But this is basically what it will look like for you. So these are the trainees, for example, in Avonbourne School, and then this is the Avonbourne School lead folder. And in the general folder, that's where you'll find in files sort of all the general materials that are accessible to everyone, such as the handbook, the half-term overview, and any training resources that we add over the year. So if I stop sharing now, I think we're sort of relatively happy with that, but just put anything in the chat before the end of the Teams call today and we'll hopefully resolve any issues with that. Oh, I did actually, hang on. I do have another job for you. Actually, Natalie, are you able to put the forms link in the...
Yes, I will do, because that's really the last
go...
thing we need from people, isn't it, in terms of today. I'll get the forms link for you.
Fab. So sort of what we need from you sort of before we sort of start drawing to a close is that when you get them, we need the future teacher school emails. Obviously, teaching personnel have their private emails, but it will be their school emails that access the schools page. Now, I appreciate depending on sort of where you are in your induction process, you may or may not have this information yet. So what Natalie's going to do is put a forms link, hopefully into the chat, or we'll send this out via email. We need your future teacher email and the mentor name and school email, because it's really important that your mentor can also access the Teams page. And if you would like your school manager to be added to the Teams page as well, that'd be another useful piece of information. If you would like your school cover manager to be added in, that's also, we'll sort of leave that with you. With regards to school induction, please can you support your future teachers and mentors with navigating through Teams, because this is just going to be where all communication, self-studies, as I've said, and information will come through. So it's really important in September that your future teachers know obviously what they're doing on Teams, and that we sort of flag up any issues early. So Natalie's put it in the chat, but we will obviously email this out as well as a follow-up with the recording of the session, so that will come out together. Is that all okay? Perfect. Danny, I'll let you round up.
Brilliant, thank you. So really, just to kind of finish, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and just some kind of things that really struck me as I was kind of thinking about the importance of this programme. We always say this to new schools when we start working with them, that we are in such a privileged position to be able to access a market that most people don't know exists. And so we kind of, I wouldn't say stumbled on this, because a lot of work has gone into this over the past 8 years, but actually a kind of seed of an idea has now grown through recognition that this actually is a really reputable route into teacher training. We work with teaching personnel so closely, and they, I speak, I think, on behalf of Ben and Miles when I say that they are kind of as proud about how far this has developed as we are, because we have seen how successful this program has been in our schools, and more recently in the hub area, so in the Swindon and Wiltshire area, we've had huge success there. And so we know it really, really does work. We've got future teachers in our schools now who are in leadership positions, and it's just such a great opportunity for grads who maybe haven't been thinking about teacher training, or don't necessarily want to go back into kind of formal kind of academia, and so this route appeals to them because they get the opportunity to train on the job, and the success of that program is down to us. So what we put into it, we get out of that. And I think we realized that here pretty early on. If we leave them to their own devices, then it really won't work. If we take the opportunity to mold them and shape them and role model what the best teachers are doing, this is where we have the most success. And so, really, I guess it is down to you. It's down to kind of, what your kind of own beliefs are around the importance of shaping teacher training, and what your school needs and so on. But I think the fact that you're on this call would suggest that you really do see this as a viable route into teacher training. And also, this is very much part of shaping the next stage and the next phase of teacher training. There's a lot going on at the moment in media around apprenticeships, and the DFE looking into apprenticeship routes. And we've kind of had some conversations with the DFE, and they've interviewed us about this route into teaching, so they are very much aware that it is a unique route. And so we're just keen to kind of keep shaping that as much as possible, so that we really do get the best graduates into our schools, so that we can shape them into the best teachers. And I think it's a privilege to kind of work on this program, privileged to be able to work with all of you on the program. Hope you've got as much out of it as we do, and we continue to get, and you know where we are if and when you need us, and we will be in touch most definitely. If you have any questions, feel free to hang around on the call, get in contact afterwards, and it's lovely to see you all. Thanks everyone. Take care. Thanks, Nikki.